Okay. Hi. When I said yes to coming to this event, I wasn't expecting to talk on the same stage with these awesome speakers. So bear with me. I don't do this very often, so I'm still kind of nervous. So I just wanted to talk to you about what I've learned in the past 3 years while working on building one of the best tools I've ever used. And I'm not modest in any way with this. So about 3 years ago, I was super lucky to join this awesome team of designers at Adobe. And we started working on XD because, as you probably know, so I'm gonna just skip a little bit. As you probably know, a few years ago, Adobe had an awesome product called Fireworks. How many of you ever worked in Fireworks? Do you remember it? Okay, in my opinion, it was the best tool for user experience because it was very contextual. You had all those controls that you need in the right time. But for different reasons, Adobe decided to close this product. So we had, as a team of designers in Adobe, we had to go back to Illustrator, which has all sorts of panels and options that are basically a all-you-can-eat buffet of options, but nothing is contextual and at the right time. And it's the same thing with Illustrator. So all our classic tools were extremely powerful, but they were not exactly built for user experience designers. So we decided to start building a new product that was designed from the ground up for designers like us to meet a modern world, a very quick tool to be able to do your work in a very fast-paced, changing world. And just as a guiding principles, we had just a few things that we are still following, and we will probably never go beyond them. So first of all, it has to be a clean and focused experience. It has to be contextual, just like Fireworks was long ago. So what we started thinking was, okay, as designers, we're always switching modes. So we tried to do the same thing with our product. So when you're designing, you're in the design mode. When you're trying to do a prototype and build some interactions, you're in a different mode and in a different mindset, so the tool adapts to your need. And at the same time, when you're trying to share your work with colleagues, with clients, with users, and get feedback, you're in a totally different world as well. So we try to build modes, and we're also building upon these modes to evolve the product even further. So this was basically the first thing that guided us, to have everything very contextual and to answer to your current need and to your current task. So one example in the current product right now is the property panel, which adapts to whatever you're doing. So when you're selecting a shape, you're only getting the options that you need for that shape. When you're selecting a text or an artboard, you're getting those kinds of settings that are relevant for you in that moment. And just as like a fun and extreme idea, that was initially the layers panel. So we tried to rethink a little bit how layers function. So if you've ever used Photoshop or Illustrator, all the layers are in the layers panel at any time. So even if you have 1,000 artboards or one, you're always seeing everything at once. And we tried to rethink the layers panel a little bit to make it the same way, clean, contextual, and relevant to your current need. This was an initial, prototype that we tested. It was a little bit extreme with the contextuality. So basically what we thought was, okay, how about we only show the things that are under the object that you're selecting or around it, which was a little bit too much. So we moved away from this, but keeping the same idea of, okay, how can we make it contextual without showing everything that you have on your canvas, and making it a little bit easier to understand and organize and keep track of. So what we have today is the layers panel a little bit changed. So whenever you're selecting something either from your layers panel or from the canvas, you're only seeing the layers that interest you, so on one artboard at once. So you always have that context of, okay, I can zoom in, I can select, and I can see everything that's relevant in that artboard, because I don't need to see all the other layers at once. So that was one of the big changes that we did for XD in terms of contextuality and being a product that's really clean and easy to understand and to learn. Another thing that we tried to achieve was how do we communicate how you interact with some elements. We introduced the repeat grid, which is sort of a way to easily repeat elements in your design without having to copy, paste, rearrange a line, and then when something has to be changed, you need to go back and do everything again. So we rethought this idea and this workflow, and we came up with repeat grid. But we had to communicate in a way, okay, what do you do with this object once it's created? How do you interact with it? So we had these sort of handles that you can drag. When you hover over spaces, you can resize the padding between them, and everything that's created in that repeat grid will trickle down and will be repeated and will be basically connected to the initial object. So this was again an example of trying to be as contextual and as easy to communicate as possible, and to make the UI talk to you without having to open tutorials and ask around, and without having a very high learning curve. So this was the first principle that we tried to achieve, to basically keep everything contextual. The other mindset and the other principle that we were trying to follow is build workflows, not features. So historically, Adobe is known for adding features, very powerful features in our products, but sometimes they just get feature bloat and feature creep, and you get a huge product that can do pretty much anything, like Photoshop, which can do from movies to GIFs and whatnot, you name it, you can do it in Photoshop. Well, we kind of tried to reverse the thinking, and we asked ourselves, okay, how do we solve real problems? How do designers actually work? And they have sort of workflows that they have to achieve. At first, you need to build wireframes, and then you need to add images and create high-fidelity prototypes, and then you have to add interactions, and so on. So we started from even the little workflows. So for example, maybe XD is for icon designers. If XD is for icon designers, what kind of tools do we need? And this informed us to add features to the product to basically reach the whole spectrum of that single workflow. So if Adobe XD is, let's say, for icon designers, what do you need? Okay, you will need some vector shapes. You'll need a way to combine those shapes to create other kinds of icons. You'll need a powerful pen tool. So this was the way we kind of build the product and build our backlog without having to decide, okay, this feature is more important or another is more important just because it sounds cool as a feature. But if it made sense for a workflow, for an entire workflow, we add it to the product. So this was a really easy way for us to prioritize. Of course, this came with knowledge and testing and asking users. Every time we interacted with users, we validated that the things that we added in the product actually made sense for that sort of workflow. So another thing that we're trying to add, and we're adding today to XD is, okay, XD is no longer just a design tool, but it's actually a platform that should help designers and teams of designers, developers, product managers, and other stakeholders to create and design other products for themselves and for their users, of course. So right now we're looking into how can we make XD work for bigger teams. So we have a file that might evolve over time, that will be more intelligent, that will have maybe versioning or infinite undo, which sounds really awesome. Never to have to lose your work. A way to share and get feedback and test out stuff and just validate your ideas and your designs. So this is the place that we're at right now. We're trying to create XD as a platform to help designers work with their entire ecosystem. Besides these two things, because, for example, Windows started building their new platform called UWP, Universal Windows Platform, we started exploring, okay, what does it mean to actually build the product for each platform and to actually be created from the ground up for that specific platform without, having something that's, written and kind of fits into each platform, but it's not built for that thing. So what we're following right now and what we're trying to do is to create XD as a good citizen of each platform. So we also have iOS and Android apps to preview our prototypes, and they're also built from the ground up for that specific platform without any kind of translation from one platform to another, which kind of led us to all sorts of small problems and glitches, and we had to design around specific platform limitations. So because I worked more on Windows, I'm going to just show you a little bit of what were the challenges that we faced when building Windows, XD for Windows, actually. So Mac OS or XD for Mac had basically ahead of XD Windows 1.5 years. So we kind of tried to build XD for Windows to have the same features, but also to meet the new needs and the new designs of Windows and the new I guess the new guidelines that they have for all the applications that they have on their platform. So one of the challenges that we faced is that UWP as a platform is built for all their apps to be just mobile apps. So the mindset is, okay, you build it once and in theory it works on every device that runs UWP, which kind of got us into a weird situation because it's a mobile application, as from the ground up. When you close an application on your mobile, there is no, hey, you have unsaved stuff. There is no way to do that on Windows, which kind of got us into a tricky situation. On Mac, we had that pop up whenever you had some work that you didn't save. You got that message that, hey, don't lose your stuff, save again before leaving. We didn't have that luxury on Windows, which kind of helped us move the needle forward for autosave. So right now on Windows, everything is saved at any point. On Mac, it's not, so there's an advantage and a disadvantage as well. Or we turned it into an advantage. So this kind of moved the work for autosave and for making infinite undo in the future or versioning a lot faster to bring it into the product. So it was okay in the end, I guess. Besides that, another big difference, because Windows was thought as a mobile app, there is no application menu. On Mac, there is always, you have always this title bar that has all the menu entries, which basically repeat everything that's in the UI, or any kind of function that you will also see in the UI, you see it on Mac in the title bar or in the menu bar. But on Windows, we had to move from this kind of thing to sort of this hamburger menu, which was fun, you can imagine. So we got back to the first principle. Okay, then we need to really be very contextual. On Mac, everything is repeated in that menu and in the UI and in different contextual menus. But for Windows, we kind of had to go back to the first principle and say, okay, we're only going to keep any kind of option that you need really contextual. It will appear whenever it makes sense to appear for the user. So we kind of went and mapped all the options, and we repositioned everything either in some sort of a hamburger menu, which has like the file and help options, because they made sense to be in a top hierarchy menu. And then everything else is moved either in the UI or in a contextual menu that will adapt depending on the selection that you have. So if it makes sense to have ungroup, if you're selecting an object or a group, you will get the option to ungroup, but otherwise you won't see it there because it doesn't make sense to ungroup something that's not grouped, and so on. You get a picture. So this kind of forced us to rethink a little bit the UI and the way it works, the way the product works, to actually be very contextual and very easy to discover things and options and features, just because they are there when they make sense to be there, without having to, guess what you can do with an option. Cool. I think I moved a lot faster through the presentation than I expected to. So this is sort of in the future, a little bit. Everybody kind of dreams of actually having a design tool that's working well with touch. We're also in that spectrum of dreaming that XD in the future will also be, will enable designers to design on touch surfaces and on touch devices. And we started adapting the UI and thinking how we can basically bring the world of a desktop tool, which is really powerful, and you usually as a designer have a power station that's, heavy with a big screen and all that. You have all that real estate, and we're trying to rethink things so it can be easier for you to do it on a smaller screen, to do it with your finger, which is a lot more imprecise than a mouse, and so on. And what we started doing was, exploring. We have a lot of experience with building iPad apps, which are really simple and very, one workflow at a time, basically, focused. But we're trying to bring the power of a desktop device into, your lap, I guess. So what we tried to do, and we rethought the way you handle all the objects on your canvas, because you have to, be precise even with a finger, and without having hover states, and without, having a very accurate way of interacting. We had to rethink the way the pen tool works, because it's a lot harder when you don't have a keyboard attached to, to disconnect all the wires and to do things that are more precise. So we're still exploring all these interactions. And actually, is there anybody in the room that designs with a touch device? I would be really curious to talk to you. Okay, thanks. So yeah, bear with me. We're gonna be there in a few months or years, or who knows. Okay, another thing that we're exploring is when you have a very small real estate, that doesn't work. Having a panel that's over there will not work in the long term. So we're thinking about adding, features that are very contextual and very, easy to reach, and without, having to eat all this real estate. So this is another thing that we're trying to achieve, to make the application adapt to your needs and to the current context that you're in. So if you're on the go, which is always a cool thing to say, but I'm not sure if we're ever going to actually meet that thing, to see designers in the airport drawing something, or building an interaction for a client or whatnot. So yeah, what we're exploring is to adapt the application, because at least for Windows devices, there are two very different form factors. There are the small devices, the Surface Books and Surface Pros, that are very small and with little real estate, and it doesn't make sense to have that real estate occupied with, panels, a lot of panels. And they also launched the Surface Studio, which is a big, huge, extraordinary desktop, and actually display, which has so much real estate. So there are two different worlds that need to be explored, and we need to design for each one in the same context. It doesn't make sense even there to have a sticky panel somewhere very far away to your context and to your design. And another interesting thing that we had to adapt and we're thinking about and testing is the way the eyedropper tool works. So right now, when you have the eyedropper with your mouse, it's really, really easy to be precise, but with the finger, you have to figure out how to find the right color without having your thumb over the color. So these are all sorts of challenges. But yeah, we're still exploring, and I would love to talk to you. We are here at the Waffles and Wireframes booth, so if you have any kind of questions and want to talk and give us feedback, we'll be there. So yeah, thank you.